I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. We'll do roll call. Will Valeria or Arnold help us out with that?
Okay, we have Rafael Dueñas,
Present.
Julian Marknowski,
Present.
Arturo Dominguez, Cesar Garay,
Present.
John Villarreal is going to be absent. Ray Rocha,
Ray's here.
Present.
There you go.
Myra Hernandez, and George Aldo.
If anyone tunes in later on, we'll go ahead and recognize them.
Okay.
Our second item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for February 2021 in the special meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second. Second by Cesar Garay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Motion to approve the minutes of March. This froze on me.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? None against. Motion carries unanimously. Julian, can you take over real quick under citizen comments?
No problem. Are there any citizen comments at the moment?
Mr. Vice Chair, at the time this meeting was called to order, there were no public comments. I'll continue to check 15 minutes after the start of the meeting and advise you if anything has come in within that time frame. As of right now, we have none.
Got it. So let's move on to the next item.
And Arnold, I don't have your agenda in front of me. Is that this presentation?
No, the presentation will be the second item. Mr. Vice Chair, I don't know what order you want to go in. There'd be a motion to call up the presentation first, or if you'd like to follow the
Motion to, yeah, let's motion to call.
I'll make a motion to have the presentation by the airport director first, and then we'll move the George's item as second. If not, if he doesn't tune in, then we'll go ahead and table it.
I second that.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and board, for having me. Jeff Miller, your airport director here in Laredo. I always love to come and talk about the airport. Everybody knows that. I wish it was in person, but I feel like we're getting closer to those days here, probably than we were at least a year ago. So I'm going to screen share here a presentation that we have put together for just some of the projects that we have going on here at the airport. Bear with me just a moment here. All right. And I think everybody, Arnold, you can see my presentation, correct? Okay. So, everybody that, if you got to know me over the last couple of years, I'm pretty informal. So if there's any questions that anybody like to ask, as I'm kind of rolling through this midstream, be more than happy to answer. I'll try to make this shorter than maybe sometimes I can, extrapolate a lot of different items, and I can talk a lot. So I'm going to try to run through some of these and just kind of give an overall view of things that we have happening here at the airport, touch on multiple items. Obviously, our generals, we're here to, safety, security, and then we also, we develop and recently we just shared down at City Hall the economic impact study that we've done here at the airport. Basically, the airport itself outputs about $272 million a year for all the collective tenants through, our activities here at the terminal, cargo. That report is going to be available for public consumption. I'm working with the city's public information officer to get it on our website and potentially the city's website, and so everybody can read it. It's not too long. It's about a 23-page report, but it does a pretty good deep dive into the activities here at the airport. And roughly, the airport itself accounts for about 1.5% of the general gross product development for Webb County. So I think that, like I said, a lot of numbers and figures and facts in there, but we'll definitely get it over to Techlo, to Arnold, so everybody can take a look at that economic impact study. But it gives a pretty good idea of the impact here is to the community. We did touch a little bit on noise grants. Noise is something that the airport administers itself. These noise grants come in from the federal government. It's basically compiled with user fees that come in through the aviation system. But the airport itself and with community development, we actually manage noise grants through certain areas that are affected by noise on certain contour levels. So when we look at our noise program, we've been very proactive and aggressive when we look towards what we're doing within the community. So you can see some of the numbers here as we go into 2020. So but we work on that as well. So sometimes people hear about the grant program. Noise, it's one of those things that it's very subjective to the listener, but the FAA has to define certain lines on who gets potential noise, sound insulation. So I won't get into all the technical details of it, but we do manage this program, and you see the grants and the announcements come out, and a lot of people ask us, hey, wait a minute, what about that noise? What does that mean? And there's a lot of integral details involved with it, but it is something that we actively manage. Our capital improvement grants, this is something that we talk about extensively. We talk about the cargo ramp development. We talk about developing all in the airfield, whether it's taxiways, runways. The airport itself, it's in what's called the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. And basically, we're considered important to the national airspace, right? So with that formula, we get roughly about $1.6 million a year. That's what we're guaranteed. So if you look at some of these numbers here, you can see how successful the airport, the city has been in getting discretionary funds, because there's always discretionary funds to get. So, 2020, for example, about 35 million in funds, of which only 1.6 million was guaranteed to go to Laredo. The rest of that, we have to make our case, which is good because the federal government looks at us and says, okay, we see the importance of Laredo, we see the importance of cargo, redoing the ramp, enhancing the ramp, expanding the ramp. Some of the COVID-19 emergency response, the same as everybody, right? Same reason why we're reading here virtual. Looking at what we've done, obviously we have an active protocol. The masks are still in place. That is one thing that, we're obviously the airport's a city entity, but we are regulated by the federal government. So the federal government mandates masks on all airport property, and that still happens. So whether you're in Laredo, DFW, Houston, even if the state doesn't have a mandatory mask requirement, airports are required to have it as a federal regulation, which is enforced by the Department of Homeland Security. So everybody pretty much understands that now. I think people in Laredo still are predominantly wearing their masks. But when we see, people coming in using the flights, we also have stepped up. You can see some of the photos here, disinfecting in the terminal. We've added some, I think, pretty neat technology we'll show you in a minute, but you see the plexiglass. We've installed, the hand sanitizer wipes, stepped up our screen, the same with TSA. TSA changed their rules around a little bit to let you carry 12 ounces of, disinfectant fluid rather than the 3.4 ounces that we've been standard to since the early 2000s. We've also installed this UV technology on our escalator handrails, which is pretty neat. It kills 99.9% of bacteria that is on the handrails, so it's continuously disinfecting as it goes through the UV rays. So that gives another level of comfort. We've signed out there to let individuals know, you touch the handrail. It's being sanitized to 99.99%. So I think even, and anybody, I don't think likes to say there's good things that come out of any, catastrophe like COVID, but at least, some of these things, obviously germs didn't just prop up. Germs didn't just happen, right? They've been around in many forms forever. So the fact that, I think we're taking some of these steps, these are going to continue as we look through COVID and then into the future. Same here, some of our equipment that we've purchased to disinfect the terminal. One of the things that when we started this really the shutdown since last year, the International Air Transport Association has put together basically the risk assessment. They went through and they looked over, the 2 billion people at that point that have flown on flights since really COVID started last March. And they looked at tracing back those individuals that, got COVID at the airport, got it on the plane. And it really came down to about a 1 in 27 million chance of getting COVID from traveling. Really where we saw some of the tighter restrictions early on were not so much around the traveling aspect, but what people were doing on the opposite end of their traveling. If they were going somewhere to spend time with family, that's usually where then you started to see the spread. But flying itself or utilizing the airport has been, relatively safe. It's actually been safer than going to the grocery store. So, but we've been balancing that message, right? We've been balancing that with, the rules of, okay, don't travel unless you have to. Now things are starting to loosen up. The CDC is now saying you can travel if you've been fully vaccinated, or I should say they're giving you the okay, which helps, with us when we talk about that messaging, because we don't want to say anything out of turn, obviously, with the health authority, but we are seeing dramatic improvements on all fronts with the passengers. These are just what we talked about before, where TSA has been working as a partner as well to help people that are traveling to reduce the exposure that they have to touching other surfaces, and also bringing some of that disinfecting fluid with them. With our commercial airliners, talked about this before. Even before COVID, the purification system on aircraft, they were to hospital standards. So the air above your vent is already purified to that level. But I think that it just goes back to, we see the steps that they're taking. Most of the flights you get out of here now, they're giving you a little packet when you go. If you have a little hand sanitizer, a little wipe. We are still seeing some of the restrictions when they start talking about, food service. But, if you get on a flight, basically the way it works today is it's kind of similar to what you've done in the past when you've flown, except for, you keep your mask on. If you have to eat, if you have to drink, you can take the mask off. That's understandable. But, generally speaking, I think the airlines, the airports have done a really good job of providing a safe product. This talks a little bit about, that balancing act that we're trying to find between, the COVID and new flights happening, right? We kicked off Aeron Marine in the beginning of this. We had a momentary pause with Aeron Marine when the CDC rule came out for coming into the U.S. and getting a COVID test. That rule is still in effect, but that momentary pause gave us the opportunity to let Mexico catch up with that CDC guidance, because it's not just Mexico, it's any country, but it came in and they had 2 weeks to implement. But now the rule is, whether you're in Mexico, the Bahamas, wherever you're coming from, you're coming into the U.S., you have to show a negative COVID test within the previous 3 days of travel. So 72 hours before your departure time from wherever country you're in, you show that negative test. So like myself, city representatives, we're going to Mexico the first week of May. But what has happened over this time is most hotels now offer a COVID test the day before you're checking out. So you meet that window, right? So you can have it done at your hotel, which, it's, I think, more easing for people. And then it also allows for that individual, if themselves or somebody in their party do test positive, most hotels and resorts now have an assurance program where they will cordon you into an area of the hotel, into a room, if you do have to quarantine for 14 days. We were just looking at some of that data. It was less than 1% of travelers, collective travelers across all of Mexico, that have had to self-quarantine down there. So, but it's I think that layer of security offers to the business traveler, the leisure traveler, that they're going to be left high and dry in a foreign country. But it's pretty simple, easy, even if you don't use it at the hotel. Aeron Marine in particular has a lab that they work with that's adjacent to the airport itself. It's about $35 US to get the COVID test. And then there's also COVID testing in the terminal of the Mexico City airport adjacent to the Aeron Marine ticket counter. So that rule is still in effect, but now that we've kicked the flight back off, we're going to our full schedule again next week, which will be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We're seeing really good load factors now comparative to where we were. They really hit rock bottom when this new rule came out, because everybody was kind of left scratching their heads, and rightfully so. You don't want to be left in some foreign country necessarily, that if you don't have family, if you don't have friends, what are you going to do if you test positive? But a lot of those extra safety layers that I just described are now in place, and I think it's offered to that level of comfort that people are looking when they travel. We launched a new website during this as well. We've put some cool tools in here. One of them that we've been trying to promote is a price comparison calculator. What this does is it shows people I like to say it's not a BS calculator. It shows people really the real difference between a ticket fare price here out of Laredo or if you're flying San Antonio or Austin. And it's truthful to what you're doing. You know, if you're going up there and you're getting a free ride and you're not paying to park, yeah, you know, San Antonio is probably going to be a better fare for you. But, you know, if you have to pay to drive yourself up there, if you have to pay to park, if you're going to do a hotel or something, more than likely Laredo is going to be competitive in that. But it gives, I think, the traveler an extra tool to use than just seeing what the base fare price is from Laredo, maybe necessarily say like San Antonio. So it's something that we've been promoting to give, you know, the people in Laredo an opportunity to really look at the base fare price plus that potential trip to San Antonio or Austin. Some of the construction projects that we're doing here, this is what we talked about before. This whole ramp that you see on here now, this is what we've been rehabilitating. It's getting close to being completed now. We're going into, you see on the top here, phase 14, and I think we have another slide here to show phase 15, which should be the closeout basically of this. But this whole ramp space, even at this point, is really capable of holding 37 Boeing 767 aircraft in conjunction with one another. And if you're an airplane geek like me, those are pretty big planes. And so it really gives us that opportunity, right, for that just in time, whether UPS, FedEx, or some of the on-demand charters like Coletta IFL, to park, to stage, to load when that shipment comes in, and then you know, depart Laredo. So it's a beautiful space. If anybody gets some time and they'd actually like to come over and do a site tour, I'd love to show any of you what it actually looks like, because it is a great project. I mean, we're talking, you know, almost, I think, up to 100 million now of construction into this, and you can see some of this on your screens here.
Jeffrey, and
yes.
These construction are already under contract, or are they still being put out for bids?
Nope. I think the last one was put out, and the name's escaping me. It's been pretty much the same. I forget the name of the company. I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of the company, but they have been bidded through the system, and I think the last one just went out. Marine Construction. I'm sorry, that's who it would be. So
Are the ones that the projects that you guys already have going on?
yeah, for this project. I mean, obviously, though, we never stop. Once we move from this, we're going to move into a 5-year capital plan, and we're going to move into taxiway work, and then those would be the same bidding process. So we're probably looking at another 50 to 60 million of construction projects on the airfield over the next 5 years. So when we're done with one phase here, we just move into the next. So, you know, the FAA loves competition on those bidding processes. So, you know, in particular, if there's items in here that when those come around that you want us to forward it off to, we would love to do that because the more competition, the better.
Yeah, and I'm looking at your presentation. I know you're going to get to a couple of slides where I'll have a few questions. So I'll let you go ahead and continue. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Sure. Absolutely. So this is what we talked about with that last phase 15 here, where we looked at construction on the northern side of the ramp space and realignment of that taxiway. You see the taxiway alpha. So this goes into the last phase of the construction for the ramp, which, like I said, will give us that large expansive space out there. And then to put some of your points earlier, Mr. Chairman, about our capital improvement plan. These projects here now starting at this point would not have been bidded yet for construction. This would be taxiway 1, taxiway 2. And you can see the shift here from the ramp to the airfield. So these are, once again, FAA funded projects, right? So this year's a little bit different because of COVID. Typically, it's a 90-10 split. 90% of this funding comes from the FAA, 10% local, which comes from airport revenue, which is generated from user fees on the airport. But this year it's 100%. So if this project, roughly we're estimating probably $8.5–9 million, will be 100% funded by the FAA, which is great. It's great for the community, and it goes back to what I talked about earlier about the economic impact study, the direct, indirect, and induced effects of $9 million coming into the community and getting spread out from not just direct jobs here at the airport, but what that activity brings. But this would be where we would start talking about where we still need to bid on these projects. And the same here. And when you look at these highlighted taxiways on here, really what these are is there's what's called advisory circulars. They're written like stereo instructions. They're very long documents, and airports have to attain to them basically. But over time, those standards change from whatever it may be. If it was an accident that happened somewhere in the National Airspace System, the geometry shifts and change, and the FAA changes how they look at certain aspects on an airfield. So when we look at, this back slide here and this slide, we're really talking about changing the geometry of the airport, and in this case, making a safer environment for aircraft exiting off of the runway to reduce runway incursions, which is, something that's out there that's not supposed to be, and then, allowing aircraft the opportunity to exit the airfield more quickly. You can see one taxiway here in the red that's being removed. This goes back to what I talked about with the geometry that changes, where they say, okay, we no longer want a taxiway that goes straight across an airfield, which you can see that taxiway does, because that leads to runway incursions, that leads to people being in the wrong spot. But if pilots have to make turns to get to that surface, that reduces the risk that they inadvertently get to a location they didn't want to be. So a lot of, like the ramp space, a lot of that was driven by the demand of the cargo demand here. As we roll into the next couple of years of the capital improvement, there are some safety concerns that we need to fix on the airfield, which you can see these slides are focusing on that. And the same here with this taxiway 3. Some of the other development projects that we have going on, we've talked about this before, the AFCO agreement. This is the group, Henry Cisneros' group. It's backed by AIII Partners, is the financing component to it, but it's the development of the airport land out there. You can see these 4 locations that they will have under their umbrella for master developing. They will be coming down here now that the master development agreement is approved to start working. I know they'll want to meet everybody, probably everybody on this call. They're going to be investing from the RFP, over the next 8 years, roughly $100 million into airport development. And in particular, if you see that kind of greenish, blue, magenta on the top right corner there, large cargo complex facility capable of, ramp space parking, plus also dock loading out to Bartlett there in Thomas Avenue for, anything that goes in an airplane is touched by a truck, right? And it's the same down there by FedEx. So that's really what they're focusing on their market. But, they're looking to bring in the money and the investment to develop these locations. But obviously they need people in those facilities as renters to develop it. Then it all is self-fulfilling, where now we have more aircraft coming in, we have more jobs, we have development out there. So I think this is a very exciting development. We just went through the last city council with the final reading on the master development agreement. So I think we're really going to hit, the rubber here for kicking this off with AFCO over the next month to month and a half. This is the secondary with the 270 group. We're still in the negotiations with them. They've been selected by city council, but the same with AFCO. We are negotiating the agreement of what this master developer agreement looks like. But you can see 2 locations here on the north or east and west sides of the airfield. But on the top, that's what's referred to as, it's going to be a fixed base operator. And it's about a $9 to $13 million facility. Fixed base operator, best way to say is kind of a glorified gas station. It's where aircraft go to get serviced, whether that's fuel, any type of maintenance activities, cleaning, refreshments. So it will cater probably to a lot of that corporate aircraft. There will be a hangar facility built with that. So I think that's exciting. And then on the orange color location there adjacent to the terminal, that would be non-aeronautical development. So we're talking a hotel chain, we're talking restaurant, potential some office space, but this development itself is the same kind of timeline as AVCO, which I just spoke about. Within the next year, we start to see development, and then really ranging out for the next 8 years for full development of both those locations. But one of the things that I think is exciting, we've been pushing for, is some conference space with the hotel that will be in front of the terminal. We know that's something that's been lacking in Laredo, so I think that will add to the community. And both of these groups are going to be, I think, good partners and investment. Between the two of these, on top of what we said with AFCO, about $100 million investment, we're probably looking at about another $30 to $40 million private investment into these two locations over the next 8 years. The CBP Aeron Marine project, this is a federal project. This is the $27.4 million project that Congressman Cuellar, obviously has been a huge advocate for. This money's been appropriated. If you look here, this is kind of adjacent to that last map we have. It's over there by Thomas Avenue across from Public Works. You kind of know where that general location is. But it's the construction of the two hangars, the operations, right? Aeron Marine, they exist here today, but they have, 50, 60 employees and 4,000 square feet. It doesn't make for a very conducive working environment. So if you see that kind of overlay you see there on the screen, a general idea of that development that will, one, give them the space they need, but also give them room to develop and advance. Right now, a lot of their rotor aircraft, their fixed wing aircraft, they have to go to San Antonio to get repaired. So now, once again, we're talking, more jobs, more mechanics here in Laredo. And the average starting salary over at Aeron Marine is about $130,000 a year. So it's good, high-paying jobs for Laredo as well. And this project, they've selected, this is a full federal project, so we're not really involved with that process, but they've selected their A&E. They're at, I think, the 35 to 60% design on this building facility, and so construction should be starting on it next year. So I think it's another exciting project that's coming online. And this is just a close-up of what the same concept of facility was built in Yuma, Arizona. So this is what we would anticipate generally it looking like, somewhere along these lines. They tend to build their buildings in very similar fashion. So it may not be exactly like this, but close to, with the ramp space and allow for, like I said, the development of that facility. This is a non-aeronautical RFP development that we had out. This is a project site for both locations, similar to what we just talked about with Aeron Marine, to the south a little bit over there on Thomas. And if you realize where our park and ride is, it also encompasses that area. That is with the group FD Stonewater. They're looking to develop this federal facility to locate different federal agencies. It's a private investment from them into building the location and then leasing back to the federal government. So those conversations are ongoing with them. That's really what we have with them at the moment now, is the right for them to develop on the property. That was approved by City Council, but at this time they're still in their negotiation processes of this development. But eventually this would, in theory, house those different governmental agencies. The terminal improvement program, this is moving along. We have weekly meetings. We're in the design phase of this right now. This is what we're talking about. Our terminal here is great, right? It's got great bones, but it was built in 1998, and it was built, in a pre-9/11 world and now operating in a post-9/11 world. And so where you see our security checkpoint, where you see the escalators, that doesn't really work anymore. We don't have the adequate space. When we start talking about our Allegiant flights, those larger aircraft, people falling off escalators, escalators having to get shut down, holding people downstairs. And the building itself is just, it's got great bones, but I think it leaves less to be desired when we start talking about, better concessions, better lounge space. You're really creating that environment where the community can use the facility. And you see that successful in an airport these sizes, something like a Duluth, Minnesota, where, maybe the chamber or Laredo EDC could come and have an event at the airport. And that's what we want to try to create here, beyond what we've had today. So we're in the planning stages of this. This is a kind of a general concept where we talked about, adding a second mezzanine to the floor and expanding, the terminal to the north. We talk a little bit about, like I said, the concessions, roof replacement, terminal design. Obviously, we want to create that sense of place in the terminal, but there also are some of those needed infrastructure improvements that aren't as, I think, appealing to the average passenger because they don't see it until, rainwater leaks on their head. So, one, adding what we need into the terminal, but also improving that space, redesigned bathrooms, right? What people are really looking for when they come to an airport these days. This is a general concept of the expansion of what it could look like as we move to the north side. I'm hoping within the next month we can have really I hate to say groundbreaking moment, but that really kickoff moment with the community here at the airport to get people excited, to get it moving. We have an approved contract right now on the design of this. but we're going to move into the next phases of that to really solidify into,
Jeffrey.
60-90%. Yes.
At the beginning of your presentation, we see a demonstration that the airport has more than double of the grants that it's received from the FAA in previous years, and we're now seeing the projects that are definitely going into place. I kind of want to speak up right now for our local contractors who sometimes find difficulties being informed of the projects, whether it be for awareness of it or something. So I think local contractors and developers can definitely partake a lot in building, especially terminal improvement projects, just as simple as roofing, where you don't need someone who's necessarily specialized in airport matters. Are you allowed to speak a little bit on the contracting process? If so, could you do so?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, as you know, Mr. Chairman, with those processes, it is a federally regulated process, right? So they would basically bid on it, and then typically lowest bidder on those projects, which is the majority of what we do here at the airport is federally funded. But what we do want to focus on, especially in the terminal, but all of our project, is local labor, and I think that's critical and important. So as we kick off this process, getting at least the information to the right people to put in these projects, that's key. Because we want, legally, I can't say I can keep the money here in Laredo. I mean, that's not what, when you work with the federal government, you're doing, typically lowest bidder. But that doesn't mean that we can't put things in place to make sure that people are aware, to make sure that they can get in the bidding process. And absolutely, and when I said this to City Council and I said it to our Airport Advisory Board, that's the idea is we want to put a large project together to put that money back into Laredo. So I absolutely am 100% behind you on that.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to get Arnold and the whole economic development department is trying to get a program in place with the SBDC at TAMIU to help certify local contractors with the government and definitely start to work on that process. That's why I just wanted to kind of bring some awareness and have you speak on that matter.
Yeah,
as well.
Absolutely. And I would love, I know, I work with Arnold a lot. We could, right now we have RS&H as our main, right? Because you do need, an aviation firm kind of heading on a lot of these projects. But when we did that, it was critical that all the subs, that are here in Laredo, that there is a sub that doesn't go through a selection process that can just be selected, have been local. We start talking about surveyors and then sub-architectural firms. So I agree, and I would love to continue as we really put this project to bid, because this one hasn't come out for the construction component to it, that we work with this group and we work with Arnold to make sure that information is getting in the right hands here locally, because I agree, as much as we can, we want to make sure that local, institutions are the ones that, can benefit from these monies coming in. So I absolutely agree with your thought and your vision there. And I'd love to continue the conversation with Arnold and this group as this.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Appreciate it.
This is what we kind of talked about before. The restaurant here at the airport, it was kind of twofold. When we lost our traffic back in March and April, we lost it significantly. And this was last year. We were down about 90%. So obviously, nobody's flying, and then also nobody's going to restaurants. So we did kind of two things here. We've actually updated these vending machines since these photos were taken, but we worked with the restaurant to give them a reprieve on their rent. They have their location on the second floor, but what this allows us to do is really get into that area when we talk about the remodel, and then we can talk about getting that restaurant space now back in. Whether it's, that would be a bidding process, but obviously something local is, whether it's the same or different, that would go through a process. But that goes back into creating that sense of place here for Laredo. But in the meantime, as we've taken over the space, we've given them some rent relief, which I think that they needed. This allows us to give us that time to really absorb that location and then expand what we need to do in the back, in the kitchen and the plumbing. And make it nice. I think the restaurant before, right? Everybody loved the food. I think what we really needed to improve on was just the appearance and, the people that are traveling too, that, they have options, right? Some people want to just grab something real quick and get on their plane, something they may know or understand. And then other people want a sense of local something unique. And so we're trying to strike that balance when we look at the new terminal design.
And I appreciate that because I know it was definitely very tough for the restaurant in there, especially with the whole flights and everything. So the rent alleviation probably helped them a ton, and I think
Yes.
that's something that we can continue to do to help local businesses.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, the 24/7 processing facility, air cargo, and we've talked about this a lot. I just wanted to kind of show this, not that we have to go through each one of these items, but the airport's been progressive with marketing and getting out this idea of, you know, going big and really what we can provide here, right? What's unique into Laredo when we start talking about that program over there, the pre-clearance program. And some of these things that we've worked with, you know, our strategic advisors on, you know, we know where Laredo is. We know the location. Everybody on this call is well aware of that. So I'm not going to get into those details. But really, what we're pushing is to expand it to open, and those conversations happen a lot. We just had another one this morning about expanding the pre-clearance program beyond what it is today, and really getting away from the 4 industries that it is currently, and expanding it beyond that to try to absorb some of what we know out there exists, like e-commerce. You know, a lot of where we work through, and I say that it's roadblocks, but it's speed bumps, is really working with the Mexican government to get them to open up some of the legal channels here for us. And there has been some changeover within their organization. And so as we work through that, it's kind of a re-edification of where we were previously and where we're moving forward. But you know, we just had some really promising conversations about expanding the program, and I'm hoping that the visit we have down in Mexico that first week in May will be fruitful, and we'll be able to probably share some of what we're trying to do there. But that's ongoing, but I think that's critical for the development of the airport. And you know, like I said, this is stuff that people on this, they understand this, but just going back to, we're sharing it not only to the aviation community, but to the governments to understand this program. Because a lot of times when you bring it up to people that aren't from Laredo, you bring it up to like a, you know, say a UPS, a FedEx, whoever it may be, they don't even know this exists. And so it's us working together to try to get that message out there. And I think we've been more successful at that than we have been in the past. I did want to show this because I think that it shows sometimes, and I think in people's mind, they think, the airport, I fly out of San Antonio, so I go to the airport. But when you look at the effects of Laredo and you look, say, at this, you know, we're 5th in the country when it comes to direct cargo going to Mexico. And if you look at these other airports on there, right, your Memphis, your Louisville, right, FedEx, UPS, Miami, Los Angeles, you know, we're boxing out of our weight class on this, which is great. And I think it shows, you know, the importance of the airport, which goes back to everything we've tried to do with the economic impact study to show that, you know, yes, we are very heavy, you know, bridge community, road system community, but the airport, I think, is an area where, you know, we can continue to improve. And even today, show some of these stats that, you know, really emphasize where the airport stands on a world stage. One of the things, obviously, that we look at with us is diversification, right? Automotive is great, but we are very dependent on automotive. So our cargo dramatically swings with it. You can see here the 44% of the makeup of what the cargo is coming into the airport. We assume that probably some of that electric machinery and industrial machinery is also a component of automotive. It's too hard to say that in this and define that and not, you know, have it be realistic. We don't want to put something out there that would be false, but that 44% is probably more in the 60 or 70% when you take in those other 2 categories, because most of those are probably in support of automotive. So if we can continue to diversify that, then the airport is less dramatic on its swings as far as what's going on in the automotive industry. And we touch on this a little bit, so I won't go too much further into that. This is my last slide. I apologize. I know I talked a lot, but if there's further questions, I would love to answer them.
You're fine, Jeffrey. Thank you for taking the time. Anybody in the committee have any questions that they'd like to bring up? I guess thank you once again, Jeffrey. We know that you had presented to the committee when you had just gotten here, probably about 2 years ago, but definitely a lot has changed, and there's a ton of other improvements and stuff going on in the airport. So I just want to thank you for taking your time. One of our main interests, obviously, being the Economic Development Committee, is definitely the cargo. I'll go ahead and share that. If we can definitely continue to push to bring more cargo to the city of Laredo, and in all of these FAA grants and improvements, let's definitely take into consideration our local contractors who are more than ready to definitely help in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and
So
thank you for having.
for your presentation.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you for everybody. I love to come by, and maybe hopefully soon you'll invite me back so we can talk more about aviation stuff. But I think it's exciting. It's great to be a part of this community. So thank you so much for having me here.
Sounds great. Thank you once again. We'll continue to our
I think Rafa just got dropped. Up.
and presentations of EDAC and any matters in.
Rafa, you're cutting in and out pretty badly.
Mr. Vice Chair, while he's getting back on, I know that there was a question about the quorum. The policy and procedure says that it's majority of the members. We're 8, so I think that would be 5. I think you can be 4 right now.
So do we have to completely stop, or?
Well, you can table the item. You can have discussion, but you can't make any formal actions or motions.
Are we for? I'm sorry.
Mr. Rocha, you, Rafa, and Mr. Garay.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to give Rafa a second. Yeah, Rafa says motion to the table. I second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Motion carries. Any motion to dismiss?
I think Rafa typed it in.
Oh,
Motion
okay. I second it.
to adjourn.
Yeah, motion to adjourn. Second by me. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys. Bye.
guys.